Justin Haley is the current lead candidate to drive the 7 car for Spire Motorsports in 2025. Daniel Suarez will return to Trackhouse Racing in 2025, and Austin Dillon intentionally wrecks Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin to win at Richmond. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got to NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed for today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. First, got a couple paint schemes to take a look at. Let's jump straight into those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2024 ABC warehouse scheme that we'll see this weekend at Michigan. I like the paint scheme a lot, like the colors. Alpha Prime usually does a great job. This one's no exception. It looks pretty exciting. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Michigan. And the only other paint scheme we're taking a look at is Parker Reslash's 2024 Funkaway scheme that we'll see in a couple weeks at Daytona. I like the scheme a lot. It's very similar to his 31 Jordan Anderson racing scheme. Of course, he'll be driving that car with Beer Motorsports at Daytona. I think it looks solid. I think it looks really exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack later this year at Daytona. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. As before the NASCAR Cup Series race took place at Richmond, you did have the Knoxville Nationals on Saturday night. And no shock and surprise, Kyle Larson won the 2024 Knoxville Nationals. This is Kyle Larson's third Knoxville Nationals win in the last 4 years. Kyle Larson continues to put up a dominating clinic and continues to win all the races. Now the second straight year he's led every single lap. He's led 100 straight laps at the Knoxville Nationals. He continues to pick up wins and picks up victories in the sprint car world. It doesn't matter what type of vehicle he gets behind, whether it's a sprint car, a Cup Series car, you name it, everything he gets behind the wheel, including IndyCar, he's very competitive. Congratulations to Kyle Larson on winning another Knoxville Nationals. He'll next year be looking to win his 4th Knoxville Nationals the last 5 years. He didn't get the win in the Cup Series race, but Kyle Larson nonetheless picked up the win in the Knoxville Nationals. Congratulations to him on winning his 3rd Knoxville Nationals in the last 4 years. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jordan Anderson. As it was announced on Friday that Jordan Anderson will drive the 32 for Jordan Anderson Racing later this year at Daytona with Volpe Foods as the sponsor. Jordan Anderson has made select starts in the Xfinity Series so far this year in the number 32 car at Daytona and Atlanta and a couple of the races sporadically throughout the 2024 season. Of course, him being the owner, they have a decent position. The owner's points, and I imagine RCR is going to help him with the engine program to try to make that 32 car get in pretty easy because they've been using a lot of Mike Harmon racing stuff earlier in the year. I think Jordan is a really good super speedway racer, and remember, he actually finished inside the top 5 earlier this year at the Daytona Xfinity race, so I honestly think he's kind of a dark horse to go out there and maybe be a candidate to go out there and win. And with Parker Russell, I've got a top 5 as well. So I think Jordan Anderson has a great chance and opportunity, and I do expect that Jordan will have a really great chance and a strong opportunity to go out there and win at Daytona in the Xfinity Series later this year. It's a really great opportunity. Glad to see him back behind the wheel of the 32 car at Daytona. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Toyota engine issues. Now, throughout the last couple months, there's been a lot of engine issues going on with Toyota. And once again, at the NASCAR Cup Series race at Richmond, they came up once again. About 160 laps ago in this race, Mark Truex Jr. radioed into his team saying that he was starting to have an engine issue and unfortunately fell out of the race and finished in last place. This is another example of another engine issue that TRD and Toyota has been having. Chris about an engine issue at Gateway earlier this year. We've seen Denny Hamlin have a couple engine issues like at Sonoma. We've also, of course, seen some other engine issues from Ty Gibbs at Indianapolis and, of course, other races like Pocono. And they've continued to have engine issues not just in their Cup Series program, but the Xfinity Series program as well. We saw Sheldon Creed have these issues, and we saw Chandler Smith have issues earlier this year as well. If they're going to contend for a championship in the Cup Series later this year, they've got to get it figured out. And a Tyler Gibbs, who's now basically taken over as a lead person for the team and for TRD, he stated that it's been multiple different issues in different areas. If this manufacturer wants to compete for a championship, they got to get it figured out because they've got the pace and speed to contend on a week-by-week basis. But if they don't figure out the engine issues going forward, they're going to fall behind, and it's not going to be good for them. So I really hope they figure out these engine issues going forward because if they don't figure it out, they're going to be in a really tough position going forward in the future. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jacob Cantor. As it was announced on Friday morning that Jacob Cantor is now officially the new competition director of Legacy Motor Club. Jacob Cantor has been around the sport for many, many years. They recently fired Joey Cohan from Legacy Motor Club. He's worked at Joe Gibbs Racing originally as engineer back in 2007 and 2008. That's where he started. Then he worked as a higher up at General Motors for many, many years. And now he's going to get the chance and opportunity to try to help Legacy Motor Club. Jacob Cantor has a lot of experience. I think he was working at Joe Gibbs Racing not too long ago as well. So I think bringing him in to really help their program would honestly be a really good thing for them to do. Legacy Motor Club has been struggling a lot this year, but they keep making a lot of changes. So if they have Jacob Cantor over there for a while, they need to keep him around and stop hiring and changing things. That's a big problem. If you keep changing things, you're not going to have that consistency, and therefore, you're not going to have that success. So overall, they need to keep Jacob Cantor over there as a competition director in order for them to have a lot of success. Hopefully Jacob can be there, help the program get better, and hopefully going into next year so they can build toward next year, they can start forming a lot better. Because like I mentioned and said, they've been struggling a lot this year, and they need to get it better going forward into the future. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Christian Eckes. As if you watched the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race last night, Christian Eckes was the winner of the 2024 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series regular season championship. He picks up an extra 15 playoff points and will now have a pretty big gap over the cutoff line, being about 30 points above the cutoff line when the Truck Series begins their playoffs at Milwaukee next weekend. Christian Eckes had a lot of consistency. Had Corey Heim not gotten a disqualification, however, I do feel like that Corey Heim could have had a really good chance and opportunity to actually be the regular season champion instead of Christian Eckes. But Christian, to be fair, was a little more consistent in the second half regular season, had a really strong run, won a stage, and got a lot of points. So congratulations to Christian Eckes on being your 2024 Craftsman Truck regular season champion. He almost won it last year as well. I think Christian's got a really good chance to win the championship. They haven't had the same pace speed they had early in the year, but I do think that Christian Eckes will be a major threat and contender for the championship later this year. He won at Phoenix last year too, so keep that in mind. And he's got a lot of good tracks coming up very, very soon. So nonetheless, congratulations to Christian Eckes on winning the 2024 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series regular season championship. He earned it, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Hall. Now, last night in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, Connor Hall made his official NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series debut, driving the number 91 truck for McAnally Hilgeman Racing. And he had a very solid and impressive debut. He ran in the top 20 pretty much the whole entire race. Some drivers in front of him had some issues. Nick Sanchez had some electrical gremlins and issues throughout the race and faded pretty far back. And Connor Hall just took advantage, had a really good truck on the long run, and his truck was very, very good and was driving through the field. We know Connor Hall is a really good short track racer. Of course, leading the Cars Late Model Tour Championship, won multiple races so far this year. And Connor really impressed me in his Truck Series debut. I really hope McAnally Hilgeman Racing for the end of the year, if they have any races left available for him to run, I'd love to see Connor Hall come back and make some more starts because I think he's earned the right and opportunity to make another start later this year. To finish 10th in your debut is very impressive. I like seeing him maybe drive a bigger track, see what he can do on that type of track. So we know he's a really good short track racer, but for him to finish in the top 10 is very impressive. And nonetheless, congratulations to him on getting a top 10 in his Truck Series debut. That's a pretty massive and great accomplishment, and in my opinion, he absolutely earned the right and opportunity to get that top 10. Like I said, congratulations to him on getting a top 10 at Richmond in his debut. Very, very impressive by Connor Hall. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Zilisch. Now, Connor Zilisch made his top tier series oval debut last night in the Richmond Truck Series race as well. And unfortunately, near the end of the race, sadly got crashed out by his teammate Chase Purdy and Brett Holmes and finished in 29th position. Now, he was on older tires by the end of the race and was starting to fade back quite a bit because he didn't have any fresh tires, so he's basically on scuffs. And a lot of drivers around him in that area had fresher tires, and he faded back from about 10th or 9th position, which he was running at that point, to unfortunately crashing out at the end of the race. And Connor said he was a little disappointed by what happened, but he was encouraged by the speed that he showed. Connor Zilisch is one of the most mature and really great young bright spots we have in the lower series currently at the moment. He was very impressive, and what I saw from the Truck Series race showed me he's got it. Spire did not have the fastest trucks. I think we all can agree they were not the fastest trucks on the racetrack later in the race, but they started figuring out their stuff, and he started moving forward and had a really good truck on the long run. I know 29th place is not a great finish, but they have the speed that he's shown, one of the few trucks that could pass throughout the event. I think that's really impressive. We obviously know Connor will be moving up to the Xfinity Series full-time next year, driving full-time for Junior Motorsports in the 88. And unfortunately, he did jump the restart, which is something that he's going to have to learn. He's only 18 years old, so I think he'll have a good chance and opportunity to learn from those mistakes going forward. But again, I was super impressed with the speed that he showed. He did a really solid and great job. And like I said, congratulations to him on a very solid debut. I know he didn't get the finish I think he was looking for, but still he had a very solid performance and pretty solid run despite finishing 29th at Richmond. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kevin Harvick. Now, if you're on social media yesterday, you saw Kevin Harvick pretty much calling out NBC. Now, why was Kevin Harvick calling out NBC? Well, if you were basically around, you saw that NBC decided to put practice and qualifying on the NBC Sports app and not put it on Peacock. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of stuff going on. We all know that the Olympics are pretty much coming to a close this weekend. With NASCAR returning on the end of the Olympics, there wasn't really a great way for them to put it on TV. But I do agree with Kevin Harvick. When you are returning to NASCAR and you're coming back from a 2-week break, you've got to find a way to promote it. And if you put it on a network like Peacock, which, by the way, yes, Peacock doesn't have as big of viewers as like USA, but it's got way more viewership than the NBC Sports app, which only gets like 50 to 60,000 people who watch on that app for everything like IndyCar, among other things. I think you got to put it there, and I'm a little frustrated they decided not to put it on Peacock when it's absolutely available. Peacock does not really cost that much, and yes, NBC Sports app is definitely free if you have a TV provider, but it doesn't get that exposure, and I think it hurt the hype of this race. We saw the attendance for the Richmond Cup Series race affected because of that, and I think people not knowing there's a race back was frustrating because until like about a couple minutes before, a lot of people did not know there was even a race going on tonight, which I think really hurts the sport in a pretty big way. So honestly, they need to figure this out going forward, especially with the next TV deal. They need to find a way to make sure they can promote the sport a little bit better and stop putting stuff behind NBC Sports app. They need to put stuff on Peacock going forward, especially if IndyCar not being there next year. I really hope they can find a way to put it on a network going forward that actually cares. NBC does care. Their coverage has been pretty good at times, but I feel like not putting it behind an NBC Sports app where you got to have basically a cable partner, that's something that they shouldn't be doing. Hopefully they can fix that going into the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bristol Motor Speedway. Now, we already kind of talked about this on the channel on Wednesday, but it was officially confirmed on Friday early afternoon that Bristol Motor Speedway will in fact host an MLB game in 2025. It is going to be called the Speedway Classic, and it's going to take place on August 2nd of 2025. The matchup is going to be the Cincinnati Reds versus the Atlanta Braves. The first two games of this three-way series is going to take place in Cincinnati, and the final game will take place at Bristol Motor Speedway on August 2nd. That's kind of right in between where the NASCAR Cup Series race is expected to take place next year, which will likely be in April. It'll be right around when the playoffs, the round of 16 race, will be about a month and a half earlier than that. Bristol Motor Speedway historically has been known for hosting some pretty big events. We all remember the Battle of Bristol between the Tennessee Volunteers. I can't remember the other college was playing. Maybe it was Alabama, if I remember correctly, but I don't exactly remember. But this is absolutely huge for Bristol Motor Speedway. They've hosted a lot of big events, and for them to do this again, they've done crazy things like Bristol Dirt, and you got to give Marcus Smith a lot of credit for doing something like this. And I really think that if they can find a way in their schedules to go out there and be at this game, I think you're going to see some NASCAR drivers show up at this event as well. But again, all depends on when the game is scheduled. I think it's a Sunday night, unfortunately, or Sunday afternoon. It will be broadcasted on Fox. It's unclear who will be in the broadcast booth. I'd have to imagine that they're going to try to find a way to put either Joe Buck in the booth or Mike Joy in the booth, or basically Joe Davis, who does a lot of commentary for the World Series. I imagine he'll be in the broadcast booth. Or maybe Chipper Jones will be available for that as well, considering he was at the announcement as well. But I still think this is amazing and really huge for the sport and pretty exciting and great to see that Bristol Motor Speedway is going to be hosting an MLB game. I think this is huge for NASCAR in a sense. I think it's going to give NASCAR some exposure, and I think it's pretty cool and awesome to see that Bristol Motor Speedway will get to host an MLB game later this year. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dale Jr. Now, with Connor Zilisch announcing that he'll be driving an 88 car full-time for Junior Motorsports in 2025, a lot of people have been asking if Dale Jr. will make his official return or run in the Xfinity Series after this year and drive the 88 car, another car at Junior Motorsports once again in the future. Well, Kelly Earnhardt Miller, who is one of the co-owners of Junior Motorsports, went on SiriusXM NASCAR radio on Friday afternoon or Friday morning. And she says that Dale Jr. has nothing planned for Xfinity past 2024 at this point, but she does say things can change for the future. She did also confirm that Dale Jr. is planning for many years down the road to continue racing late models around 45 races every single year, but it's not clear at this point if Dale Jr. is going to return. Now, there is a chance and possibly that Junior Motorsports could run 5 cars next year in 2025. It's already been announced Connor Zilisch will be in the 88 car next year full-time. It was also announced, well, it's not been confirmed, but we think Sammy Smith's going to be back at the team and Justin Allgaier is going to be back at the team. But let's say Dale Jr. does decide to come back for a one-off start. I think about that 8 car. We know Dale Jr. is expected to get the rights to the number 8 car as he's won the rights to that, but those will not be available. For a while, I could see Dale Jr. finding a way to drive the number 8 car next year if he wanted to return to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. But like I said, there's also a really great chance and a strong possibility that Dale Jr. may decline coming back and might just focus on owning his team or trying to find a way to bring Junior Motorsports up the cup, considering those rumors are still going around at this point, even though they've been kind of confirmed it's not exactly this point, if they are going to be happening. So I really do love and would love to see Dale Jr. come back and maybe do a one-off. But if this is his last run at Bristol, he's had a great career. He's won nearly 30 NASCAR Xfinity Series races. He's also won 2 Xfinity Series championships and has had a great career in NASCAR. And if he doesn't want to come back and race after next year, I can't blame him. But at the same token, same time, I think it'd be pretty amazing and pretty fun to see Dale Jr. once again come back and race in the sport for maybe one more time. I do think he can still be very, very solid and pretty successful if he drives for Junior Motorsports. But if, like I said, if this truly is the last time that we're going to see Dale Jr. race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series after this year, I don't blame him one bit. He's had a pretty great career in the sport, and he's earned the right and opportunity to retire from not full-time, but racing in NASCAR, and maybe focus on late models of the Cars Late Model Tour, which he's been racing in for a very, very long time as well, and been working to grow that series as well. So nonetheless, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in regards to that if Dale Jr. decides to come back next year. But at this point, at this time, we don't know exactly at this moment if Dale Jr. is going to come back and race in the near future after this season. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're doing a silly season checkpoint. So Bob Pockers basically did a little bit of an update on his article from this past week when it was announced Dillon Suarez will be returning to Trackhouse Racing for 2025, which we're going to talk about in just a second. And there's some interesting notes that were mentioned in the article, beginning with Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace is expected to return to 2011 racing in 2025 and will be back in the number 23 car once again. While the contract extension has still not been announced for the 2025 season, I would imagine in the coming weeks, in the next 2 weeks especially, I imagine that Bubba Wallace is going to get that multi-year extension signed. They are also expected 2311 Racing to have a third car for the 2025 season. So who is going to get that third 2311 Racing car? We are expecting that Riley Herbst more than likely is going to get that third seat. Now, Riley stated, speaking to Speed Sport this past week on the podcast of Connor Daly and Chase Holden, he did say that he's still looking at options for next year, but many people do believe in the industry that Monster Energy and the terrible Herbst brand and the Herbst family is working to buy that charter for Denny Hamlin for a third charter. But the thing that's holding that up currently at the moment is a charter deal still not being done. But we do believe that Riley Herbst will be back with 2311 Racing in 2025 or going there. Now we talk about Zane Smith. We're going to talk about Trackhouse later, but Zane Smith is currently being linked to 2 organizations. Some have linked him to the 7 car for Spire Motorsports next year, but now he's being linked over to Front Row Motorsports for 2025 and reuniting with the team and organization. Zane Smith has honestly had a very, very solid year, all things considered, or gotten better this year. And I think going back to front row and being teammates with Noah Gragson and, of course, Todd Gilliland next year, that would be a really solid and great combination and good lineup. Because Zane Smith's figuring it out. The pace speed is getting a lot better for Zane, and I think he could end up at front row next year. Sam Mayer, however, is also frontrunner for that third seed. We all thought Sam Mayer was going to get that third seed, but he's been linked to Kaulig Racing potentially, not just in the Cup Series, but in the Xfinity Series as well. We do believe that Sam Mayer will not be returning to Junior Motorsports in 2025. So we do think he'll probably be going to either another organization, like Kaulig perhaps, or will be going to the Cup Series next year, which I think is extremely likely and extremely possible. Eric Jones is another name that's been kind of rumored in the links. Some think that he will likely return to Legacy Motor Club for 2025, and I do expect that Eric Jones will be back in number 43 car for Legacy Motor Club in the 2025 season. But from what I understand, he wants a multi-year deal with Legacy Motor Club. So Eric Jones more than likely will be looking to get that deal done so that he can return to the team in 2025. As we now move on to Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece, we know, is still not have a deal signed for 2025. He has been linked to the Haas factory team for next year in Xfinity. Other drivers like Haley Deegan, Sheldon Creed have also been linked to the Haas factory team for next year, as well as Sheldon Creed can make the transition over there and leave Toyota, as Brandon Jones might be going over back to Joe Gibbs Racing next year. AJ Allmendinger is expected to either be in Cup or Xfinity next year with Kaulig Racing, though many people are linking that he's going to be moving back up to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025. And Harrison Burton is another driver that has also been linked to teams like Rickware Racing, same with Ryan Preece, but Harrison Burton could go to the NASCAR Xfinity Series and drive for a team like AM Racing in 2025. The NASCAR Cup silly season is going to be very interesting as we progress through the rest of the silly season. There's some big moves planned and some big announcements coming soon. And I think by the end of this month, a lot of those big key moves for Cup and Xfinity are probably going to be done, which is going to be very interesting to see how things play out. And we'll keep an eye on this stuff as it progresses and goes on going into the future. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR Xfinity Series silly season. So last night on Twitter during the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race, Couch Racer account that's ran by Brett Griffin and Freddie Kraft put out a very vague tweet. They said during about the halfway point of this race, they said two of the drivers inside the top 5 during the Truck Series race are expected to move up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series full-time in 2025. Those 5 drivers are mentioned were Christian Eckes, Lane Riggs, I believe, was in the top 5 at the time. Grant Enfinger, I believe, was inside the top 5. I think Corey Heim might have been in the top 5. And another driver was in the top 5 was Taylor Gray as well. So when I see that there were 2 people that are mentioned, along with something that he did mention, that the driver of the one truck is most likely moving up to Xfinity full-time. So who are the 3 drivers that might be moving up to the Xfinity Series next year? Well, first one I think of is Taylor Gray. Taylor Gray currently has a part-time deal with Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He's made select starts so far this year in the number 19 car. Has shared that duties this year with Eric Almirola and Ty Gibbs and other drivers throughout the year. And Taylor's had some pretty standout and good performances in 2025. And I do believe that if he does move up, I think he could be a top 10 contender on a week-by-week basis. Now, do I think that Taylor Gray is going to go out there instantly win races if he does go to Joe Gibbs Racing next year? Not necessarily. I do think Taylor Gray is a great and talented race car driver, but I'm not sure if he's really going to set the world on fire if he does move up to Xfinity. But I do think he'll do a very, very solid job. That other driver that likely will be moving up to Xfinity with Joe Gibbs Racing is William Sawalich. William Sawalich will make his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut at Homestead in October, and many people do believe that once he turns 18 years old, he's going to finish the remainder of 2024 and then start driving full-time, maybe in the number 18 car next year. We already talked about Sheldon Creed being rumored to go to the Haas factory team for 2025, so we might see William Sawalich driving an 18 car for 2025. The other driver that I think will be moving up to Xfinity is Christian Eckes. There has been a lot of chatter going on in the industry, including from Bob Pockers and other accounts on Twitter, that we do think that Christian Eckes is on the way up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series full-time next year to Kaulig Racing. Bob had reported a couple weeks ago that he's had conversations with Kaulig Racing to move up to their team. Now, I think we all kind of know the Call Racing's NASCAR Xfinity Series program as of late and recently. That program hasn't had the same strength and speed they've had in previous years like 2021 and 2022. But at the same token and same time, Christian Eckes has done an insane job in the NASCAR Truck Series this year. Like I mentioned, he won the regular season championship for the Truck Series this year. And I think he has a really good chance and opportunity to win the NASCAR Truck Series championship this year. So I really think that Christian Eckes will move up next year, and I think he'll be a championship threat and contender. There's also rumors of a merger happening between RCR and Kaulig and Xfinity. If you have RCR and Kaulig working together, we're like a four-car team. That would be very interesting if that ended up happening. But I do think there's some pretty big moves happening in the Xfinity Series very, very soon. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how things play out and what happens with the NASCAR Xfinity Series silly season. So we'll see what happens and what moves are made. But we do expect some pretty big moves that are coming for the Xfinity Series silly season very, very soon. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Richmond Raceway. As for the NASCAR Cup Series race happened earlier tonight at Richmond, Kelly Crandall put out a tweet in regards to Richmond's future. She spoke to Denny Hamlin about this, and she says that Richmond Raceway is rumored to lose a date in 2025. And Denny Hamlin replied to that by saying that he's really not surprised or shocked that Richmond will likely lose a date in 2025, as it's not been marketed very well at all. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of talk about Richmond losing a date since we had the Easter race back in April. The rumor going on at the moment right now is that Richmond is expected to lose a date at the end of this year, which will probably likely be the spring race that happened in order for NASCAR to go to Mexico City. Now, NASCAR still needs to get a deal done with Mexico City for this to happen, but we are expecting that there will be an international race in 2025, and that race is going to take place on June 8th. Again, we are expecting that the spring race will likely be gone from Richmond. And I think Richmond tonight, what's such a shame too about Richmond at least losing a date now, despite I think it should only have one date, what's a shame about tonight is that tonight's race at Richmond was honestly very, very solid and really, really entertaining. It had multiple grooves throughout the race. You had comers and goers throughout the field. The tires worked extremely well tonight. And I think NASCAR found at least a little bit of a solution to some of the problems they had. But at the same time, I think most tracks in general, like Richmond, should only have one date to give more tracks an opportunity and shot. And NASCAR does, if they want to succeed long term, they do need to find a way to go to international so that NASCAR can expand their portfolio. Again, there's rumors of them going up to Canada. They actually almost went to Canada for this year, and unfortunately that deal fell through. So instead they went to Iowa, which is kind of similar to Richmond. But Richmond's been rumored to lose a date for a while, so it's kind of like one of those I'll believe it when I see it. But it sounds very likely once a deal gets done for Richmond to lose a date, it will likely end up happening. I like Richmond's race this year. I thought it was a very entertaining race. Joe Sturgley, like I said, reported that this is the most lead changes I think race has had at Richmond in over 30 years, since like 1991, which is super impressive. And a lot of comers and goers, which is what Richmond's needed. It needed to be action track, even with the controversy. I thought the racing tonight was solid. But like I've already said, at the same token, same time, you've got to have a good racing product all the time, and people show up. And unfortunately for Richmond, not a lot of people have been showing up in recent years, which is why I think it's been suffering for attendance for a very, very long time. So I'm not shocked and surprised about this. It's expected to lose a date. We do know Talladega is likely going in the playoffs next year as well, and there's some other big changes coming soon. We do know the schedule will be announced relatively soon in the future, and we'll see what changes are coming. But like I mentioned already, Richmond is expected to lose a date for 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Trackhouse Racing. Now, earlier today, it was reported by Bob Pockers that we know that Trackhouse Racing is looking to expand to a 3-car operation for 2025. And Ross was asked a question surrounding this. Ross kind of said that it really doesn't affect, and it doesn't affect him overall, but he does say he tells Trackhouse drivers that he doesn't really know what Justin Marks is doing when he makes these decisions when it comes to Trackhouse's future. It is no secret, like I mentioned already, that Trackhouse Racing is looking to expand to a 3-car operation for 2025. We already know they were looking at one point to have a 4-car operation for next year, but there's a charter revision that's expected to come in the next charter and TV deal that they're only going to allow 3 charters, and only a couple teams like Joe Gibbs Racing and Hendrick Motorsports are going to be excluded from that. So that's why they're expected to only have 3 cars next year instead of 4. Now, where are they expected to get the charter from? we are expecting that Trackhouse Racing is going to get that third charter from Suarez Racing. Suarez Racing will shut down their program at the end of the year. We do know Front Row has acquired one of those charters for next year. We know this Suarez Racing will kind of be rebranded the Haas Factory, and Gene Haas will keep a charter for Cole Custer. And then 2311 Racing, like I mentioned, they will be a 3-car team. It's expected to be Riley Hertz, but we could see drivers like MTJ, Carl Lewis, Kurt Busch, all those guys kind of get a chance and opportunity to get behind the wheel. But who is going to be the driver of this third car if they do get a third charter? Well, many people do believe that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to get the third seat for 2025. Some have said Zane Smith maybe, but again, SVG is the favorite for the third seat. Shane has had a very solid year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I know they just had a crew chief change very, very recently, but Shane is impressed in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year. He's had some solid and really great runs, has had a couple top 5 finishes. He's just coming off having a top 5 finish at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, had a great run there, and also he went on to win 3 road course races so far this year, and he's already getting better on ovals, and he's got sponsorship funding with him from companies like WeatherTech and Wendy's as well, and Red Bull as well, that's been working with him for many, many years. I expect Shane Van Gisbergen is going to get the third seat for next year. Now, going into the future, we'll have to see how long Shane Van Gisbergen's contract is going to be, but I do imagine that SVG is going to at least get a 1 to 2 year deal with them to be in a third car, likely the number 97, but like I said, we do expect that he will get in the third Trackhouse car for 2025. That announcement is expected to come in the next couple weeks. Like I mentioned, a little silly season update. That announcement is coming very, very soon, but Trackhouse Racing is looking to expand for sure to a 3-car operation for the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. As there was a lot of talk and conversation surrounding Kyle Busch and a potential injury that he received at the Brickyard 400. He tried to take his helmet off after the Brickyard 400 had concluded, and he couldn't get the helmet on, and he actually had to have a crew member help him get it out. Then Samantha Busch put out a little bit of an Instagram post on her story showing that Kyle Busch had a little bit of a sling or wrist thing on his wrist trying to cover it up. And then she deleted that Instagram and story post, but then eventually she basically put up another post without you seeing the arm. So Kyle Busch was in fact asked that question, did you injure your wrist during the Cup Series race at the Brickyard? And he actually confirmed this by saying that he has suffered a wrist injury at the Brickyard 400. And he actually kind of confirmed something very interesting as well. Had there not been the Olympic break for 2 weeks, Kyle Busch would not have been racing this weekend at Richmond Raceway or the next weekend. They would have had to have a relief driver. That relief driver most likely would have either been a driver like Shane Van Gisbergen or would have had to been a driver like Austin Hill, who's driven part-time for the team, or maybe even Ty Dillon, or maybe even Jesse Love as well. But Kyle Busch has obviously had a very bad year so far for his standards. It's been a major struggle for RCR on pace and speed. Sure, they got the win earlier this evening at Richmond, but the number 8 team has just had a lot of bad luck. In the last 6 or 8 races, Kyle Busch has had 5 DNF finishes and has just made other mistakes. And of course, this wreck comes from when he was trying to pass Denny Hamlin, trying to move, I believe, inside the top 5 or finishing in like 3rd or 4th position. He made that big mistake and crashed hard into the outside wall, which again, with these next-gen cars, they are very stiff, but it's nothing uncommon with other forms of sport. We saw Alexander Rossi that he basically wrecked at Toronto, and unfortunately he had a wrist injury and had to miss. Now he's medically cleared to run at Worldwide Technology Raceway later this weekend, but he had to miss the race because of a wrist injury, so he had to miss for a very, very long time, which is very unfortunate. Maybe this wrist injury could kind of be the thing that kind of helps Kyle Busch going forward and doesn't have any more issues where he gets involved in wrecks. He just needs something to go his way because it's been a frustrating year for Kyle Busch. There's obviously been rumors of him leaving the team at the end of the year, and they made a new engineer change very recently. Ben Lynch has come in, who of course did work with Austin Dillon recently. They made a new engineer change. Hopefully that could lead Kyle Busch to a little bit more success. But it's interesting that Kyle Busch could have absolutely missed a race had we run. And luckily that Olympic break happened just in time. At least Kyle Busch had something lucky go down because he does have a couple weeks where he can take a little bit of time to try to get better from what happened. So he said he was good to go. He didn't have a relief driver ready for tonight, which he didn't need it, and did have decent speed, but wasn't absolutely fastest car on the racetrack. But at least Kyle Busch was at the racetrack, and that's all that matters at this point. Again, hoping that that wrist can get better very, very soon, so Kyle Busch can be ready to go to try to make the playoffs the next 3 weeks, though it's going to be a lot harder now with Austin Dillon getting that win and victory earlier this evening at Richmond Raceway. Tough break for Kyle, but unfortunately he had that injury that cost him a shot at maybe some more good runs. He's probably not 100% currently at this moment because of that injury. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dale Jr. and Junior Motorsports. For the last couple of years, we have been talking about this on this channel since 2021 about the possibility of Dale Jr. bringing Junior Motorsports up to the NASCAR Cup Series. We've been talking about it since Martinsville of 2021 when Josh Berry won his first career NASCAR Xfinity Series race driving the number 8 car on a part-time stint, but driving a lot of the year. And during that time, Dale Jr. said that Junior Motorsports was interested in making the move up the Cup. But the reason that Junior Motorsports has not made the official move up to the Cup Series is because of how much the charters are. We know the charter value has been going up in recent years, though it's been devalued just a little bit because the charter negotiations are still going on at this point. The charters are still with around $20 to $40 million. And we do think the charter value, once a charter agreement is finalized, we may end up seeing them go up a lot more than they are currently at the moment, considering we know Live Fast Motorsports sold their charter to Spire Motorsports for $40 million. And this conversation has come up once again. Earlier this week, Adam Stern put out an article and tweet talking about the Steinbrenner family who's interested in purchasing a charter or investing into a charter. And Dale Jr. was also mentioned in that article as well. And Dale Jr. confirmed something on basically his podcast, Dale Jr. Dillon, I believe it was on Wednesday. He says that he has actually had conversations with the Yankees and the Steinbrenner family about investing in the charter. Talk about it a few years ago. And he says he still has some interest in investing in a team. Obviously, if the Steinbrenner family is going to bring a lot of money in, we could see Junior Motorsports find a way to get into the sport. And I think Junior Motorsports being in the NASCAR Cup Series would absolutely be very huge and really great for the sport because Junior Motorsports brings a lot of value. We know that Junior Motorsports is the most popular organization, any form of racing, maybe outside of Hendrick Motorsports and maybe Trackhouse Racing at this point. But them getting involved in the NASCAR Cup Series would be huge. Now, let's say Dale Jr. doesn't bring his team up completely and he decides to invest in a team with the Steinbrenners. Who could he work with? What about Spire Motorsports? Spire Motorsports and Junior Motorsports do have a partnership. We know Andretti Global is working with that team. There's a lot of rumors they're expecting to buy into that team going forward. And the Steinbrenners, which is owned by the Steinbrenner family, they have an association with Andretti Global as well. So I could see him investing in Spire Motorsports. What about JTG Doherty? Dale Jr. and Brad Doherty used to work together in the TV booth for NBC, and that could be the getaway because we know JTG Doherty is expected to lose the JTG brand at the end of the year because of the fact that Joe Gibbs is expected to pick up the Kroger brand for 2025 and work maybe with Chase Briscoe and Ty Gibbs and other people at the team next year. So that could be a team he goes invests with. But I would love to see Junior Motorsports decide to go ahead and make the jump up to the NASCAR Cup Series. It's been a long time coming. We've all wanted it. I think there's a better chance now than ever it does end up happening because Dale Jr. seems to be a little more involved. But it's kind of also like that thing where you say, I'll believe it when I see it, right? Because we're all still waiting for the same thing to happen, and nothing's happened at this point. But I do think there's a greater chance and a greater possibility that we could see Junior Motorsports decide to make the decision to go ahead and bring them up the Cup. And I think we all kind of want it at this point where they can make the jump up to the NASCAR Cup Series. I think they'd be very solid and successful. And they've got a solid lineup, and they could find a way to work with a team like Trackhouse Racing, maybe get Conor Zillich some select Cup Series starts. I think that could be a very big possibility and a big shout as well. So nonetheless, I really would love to see JRM make the jump up the Cup. I think it is still going to be tough for them to fully make the jump up the Cup for 2025, but I do think there's a solid chance and a strong possibility that we could see JRM all of a sudden decide and go ahead and make the move up for the 2025 season. We'll see if they decide to go ahead and make that decision and maybe move up in 2025. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Austin Dillon. Now, as many of you have probably seen and watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at Richmond, Austin Dillon was cruising to a very shocking upset and a very easy win and victory with 3 laps to go. All of a sudden, with 2 laps to go in regulation, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Ryan Preece got into a little bit of a pissing match and got into contact going into turn 1 right in front of Austin Dillon. This would bring out the caution. Everyone would come down pit road. They would all get basically the option tire, the red tire for the end of the race. And basically Austin Dillon, who had a really good night going, won the race off of pit road. On the ensuing restart, Austin Dillon restart on the inside and Joey Logano restart on the outside. And Joey Logano actually got a better restart and was able to clear Austin Dillon for the race lead. And Logano started pulling away just a little bit as they came to the white flag. Going down the back straightaway, however, Austin Dillon basically said, screw it, I'm going to send it, and completely runs in the back of Joey Logano, and Joey Logano hits the outside wall very hard, taking him out of contention. Then coming down the front straightaway, Austin Dillon completely comes down the track a little bit. Denny Hamlin might have come up, we're not entirely sure, but from the replay that looked like Austin Dillon goes down the racetrack, right rear hooks Denny Hamlin, and storms off and picks up the win and the victory in this race. After the race concluded, Joey Logano justifiably was mad and frustrated. He called it a chicken shit move. He basically said that I've seen bump and runs and I've done it before, but what Austin Dillon did was completely unacceptable. He called him a piece of crap, says he's got no talent. He's sucked in the Cup Series pretty much since he's got there, and called him out very, very heavily. Denny Hamlin also was very mad and frustrated after the race as well. Showed his displeasure by basically saying that Lane Ray's got a 2-lap penalty for doing something very similar at Kansas, and Austin Dillon got nothing for that incident and wreck. And basically called out saying that NASCAR does need to do something, otherwise this sport is going to continue losing the credibility that it's lost for a long, long time. Other drivers weighed in as well. Bubba Wallace was not very happy with how Austin Dillon won that race. He actually said he was going to go up to Austin Dillon and shake his hand for winning that race at a time legitimately. But after how Austin Dillon won that race at the end, Bubba Wallace said that he's not doing that. He was not very happy about that. Tyler Reddick also spoke on the situation as well and was not very happy about how it happened. He basically said NASCAR has penalized drivers for doing the same thing as well and getting away with it. After the race concluded, multiple Twitter personalities were basically putting out the audio of the wreck that ended up happening, and you can hear in the audio that was coming out. Someone on the radio, not Richard Scholes, but someone on the radio was saying, wreck him. When the wrecks were going, I said, there you go, wreck him. And he said, hell yeah, after the wreck concluded. Now, Richard Scholes went and basically in the media center after won the race, he denies that the radio was out there saying that no one on the team told Austin Dillon to clearly wreck him, even though there's clear audio and evidence showing them saying it. And then Richard kind of went double down, and Austin Dillon kind of said, we're number one on Twitter trending. And about an hour after the race concluded, NASCAR spoke to the media, and they said they are going to review the situation, and there could be some penalties coming down the line for multiple drivers, including Austin Dillon. I kind of already given my thoughts on this situation, and here are my final thoughts a couple hours after the race concluded. I think what Austin Dillon did was absolutely ridiculous. Look, I get that this format has created this situation, and it's created a lot of this kind of stupidity. And I know people are going to say, but Dale Earnhardt did it back in 1986 to Darrell Waltrip. That still wasn't the right move. I get you got to do what you got to do to go out there and win races. But at the same token, same time, intentionally wrecking somebody for the win, forcing them up the racetrack, that's a little bit hard racing at times, but also very egregious there. And then right rear hooking Denny Hamlin down the straightaway? Really? We're going to accept that as a sport? No, I'm sorry. We cannot accept that. That kind of stuff is completely uncalled for. And I'm not saying that Austin Dillon needs to be stripped away from his win, because before that caution came out, he was easily going to win the race, which I would have congratulated him on that. And while it would have shaken up the playoffs, it still would have been a little more legit than how he won the race tonight. And I feel bad that he had to restart there, but at the same token, same time, you can't be doing stuff like that and cause wrecks like this. What he did was unacceptable and uncalled for, and NASCAR needs to review it, and they need to penalize him for it. You can't justify wrecking somebody down the straightaway. We can't be turning the sport into the wild, wild west. They have to officiate rules, and they need to do something about this. Otherwise, this sport is going to continue looking extremely bad, and they need to make some sort of penalty call. You got to penalize Austin Dillon. Don't take the win away. I don't know if they're going to do that, but they got to send some sort of message to the drivers. A suspension would definitely be justified here. I know the Cars Tour did take a win away from somebody. I'm not sure if they're going to go that far, but I think that there have to be some sort of repercussions done, because otherwise, if they don't do something about this, there will be no traction, there won't be anything done, and I think sending out some sort of penalty is the way to go, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Suarez. Now, we already kind of talked about this on the channel on Friday, but it was officially confirmed on Friday that Daniel Suarez has officially signed a contract extension with Trackhouse Racing for 2025 and will return to drive the number 99 car for 2025 with Freeway Insurance sponsoring for a third of the year in 2025, including the Daytona 500 and the All-Star race as well. Now, like I mentioned, it's only a one-year deal. But Daniel Suarez did confirm this past week in speaking to the media that he does say that if his performance does tend to get a lot better, that extension could be a lot longer. We obviously knew that this has been coming for a very long time. We've been expecting that Daniel Suarez was going to sign a contract extension with Trackhouse Racing for 2025. But what's very interesting to me is I originally thought that it was going to be a multi-year deal for Daniel Suarez to stick around with the team. But they're only giving him a one-year deal. And like I mentioned, it's all going to be based off performance. Next year is going to be a put-up or shut-up year for Daniel Suarez. He's been having these 1 to 2 year deals over the course of the last few years, and you've got a lot of really talented drivers that are coming through the Trackhouse pipeline currently at the moment. Obviously, Ross Chastain has been having a much better year at times, so I will say in the Cup Series race earlier this evening, Daniel Suarez was very impressive, won a stage earlier in the evening, and if he has runs like he had at Richmond all the time, that will keep him in the ride long-term going forward. But he also does have sponsorship and funding with him, which will help him have the chance and opportunity to stick around for Trackhouse Racing for a very, very long time. But you've also got to remember this. You got Shane Van Gisbergen, who's been doing really well in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, who we'll talk about in just in a second. But I think it all also depends on how Connor Zilisch does in the Xfinity Series next year. We've talked about it quite a bit on the channel, but we know that Connor Zilisch will be driving full-time for Junior Motorsports next year. If Connor Zilisch sets the world on fire next year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series with JRM, there could be a really great chance and a strong possibility that Daniel Suarez's ride could be in jeopardy. Now, Suarez can move to another part of the Trackhouse organization going forward. But next year is going to be the 5th year for Daniel Suarez. And I think Suarez is a solid driver. He's not a driver that always sets the world on fire by any stretch of the imagination, but he's a driver that is steady at times. And he's been in the top 20 points pretty much about every year he's been with Trackhouse Racing outside of their first year. He got him their second win in 2022. He's nearly won other races, and he had a chance to win in Richmond earlier this evening. I do think that Daniel Suarez has talent, but he's got to do better next year. He can't run about where he's been running a lot of this year. He needs to be consistent in the top 5 and top 10. Now, obviously, Trackhouse Racing has had a little bit of a down year in performance. There's no denying that. They haven't had the same pace and speed they had in 2022 and also in 2023. Because Daniel Suarez in 2022, he ran a lot better. He had more pace and speed and was a bigger contender at that time. So he's going to have a lot of pressure going into 2025 to run better. So what are my expectations for Daniel Suarez going in 2025? Well, I think he needs to have more top 5s and more top 10s. You can't have only 4 or 5 top 10s in a year. You need to have almost double-digit top 10s. And you need to be in a playoff contending spot on points. You can't rely on getting a lucky win in Atlanta where you're very close to losing that race. You need to run better than that if you're going to stay in the ride long term. But if he runs, and let's say runs top 10 consistently and gets maybe a couple wins next year, because I think just getting one win is not going to help his case of sticking around at Trackhouse Racing long-term going forward. He needs to win a couple races next year. And if Trackhouse Racing can improve their stuff and improve their equipment, that will give him the chance and opportunity to stick around. Otherwise, like I already mentioned, he's going to lose a seat to a driver like Connor Zilisch. And Connor Zilisch, like I've already talked about, he's extremely talented, one of the best young talents we've seen come up through the ranks in recent years. And I do believe that if Connor Zilisch just sets the world on fire and gets like a 10-win year next year with JRM, I don't care how good Daniel Suarez does, I think he's going to lose his seat. So next year in 2025, it is going to be a massive and major make-or-break year for him. If he can do very well next year, I think Daniel Suarez will be back with the team for many years going down the road. I think Suarez is a talented race car driver. I mean, the guy won an Xfinity championship nearly 10 years ago and also has won some races in Brazil, also won the NASCAR Mexico Series, became the first driver to win 3 International Series races in a year. So the guy has talent and can prove himself. If Trackhouse equipment, though, can get better, I think that Daniel Suarez will be in a much better position going forward. But I am happy to see that Dillon Suarez is going to be sticking around with Trackhouse Racing at least through next year. He is a good race car driver and deserves to be in that ride for 2025, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about the 7 car for Spire Motorsports. Now, a couple weeks ago, it was announced that Corey LaJoie would not be returned to Spire Motorsports for 2025, despite the fact that we were all expecting that Ronnie Childs would be crew chiefing for Corey LaJoie in 2025. We now officially know that he will not be back with the team in 2025. And there's been a lot of talk and conversations around who could be the lead candidates to drive the number 7 car for Spire Motorsports for 2025. Earlier this week, Jordan Bianca was basically in the Dale Jr. Download studio speaking with Hannah Newhouse and Jeff Gluck, and they were talking about who the favorite is for the number 7 car. And according to them, the current favorite for the number 7 car is Justin Haley. Now, it does need to be known that Justin Haley technically does have a multi-year deal with Spire, not with Spire, but with Raceway Racing to drive for them for the next 2 years. And Justin stated about a month or so ago that he was expected to return to Raceway Racing. So how could he find his way over at Spire Motorsports next year? Well, it comes down to funding. Gamebridge has invested a lot of money into Spire Motorsports, and they spent a ton of money bringing people in like Michael McDowell. Travis Peterson, who's leaving front row to go over there, signed a multi-year deal for Michael McDowell. They, of course, bought the Truck Series program for Kyle Busch Motorsports. Kyle Busch's program has got Raj Kroof under their stable and Carson Ospar under their stable now. And obviously, Rodney Childers is coming over to be the crew chief of the number 7 car. And we've already talked about the rumors of Andretti Global coming in and working with the organization. Justin Haley has been the hot-headed rumor for the number 7 car. Now, they do also mention that there is an outside candidate who could be in the running for the number 7 car as well. That I think of some other names. So who's not signed to their rides for next year? Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace is not signed with 2311 Racing right now, but I would imagine he's going to sign a deal. I've seen people mention Eric Jones. Eric Jones is wanting a multi-year deal with Legacy Motor Club for 2025, but they still don't have a deal signed currently at the moment. And Spire is becoming a much better team and organization, and they're kind of starting to get ahead of Legacy Motor Club, at least in some instances, in performance. I think Eric Jones would be a really good candidate, and he could be that untalked about driver. But a lot of people are thinking Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch, there's been a lot of rumors about him leaving RCR. Now, technically, Kyle Busch did sign a 1-year extension and they played his option year for 2025. But I do think there's a chance and possibility that Kyle Busch, if they could persuade him with the Gamebridge money, they could find a way for him over there as well. But again, Kyle Busch is committed from what we understand, so I'm not sure if he's going to be the driver. Going back to the lead candidate, it is Justin Haley. Justin Haley's been linked, and a lot of people have been saying, including myself, do believe that Justin Haley is going to get the number 7 car for 2025. And unlike Corey LaJoie, who has struggled in that 7 car recently, he has not scored a top 10 outside of a super speedway. He hasn't done that on non-super speedways. Justin Haley actually has won a race for Spire. Now, granted, it was back in 2019 when they still were a new team and organization, so they were still getting up and swing of things, and they were still building their cars out of Premium Motorsports, and we're still in that building. But Justin Haley, look at what he's done with Raceway Racing this year. And there were rumors of him at one point going to 2311 Racing. There were rumors at one point of him going to a team like the Wood Brothers. He was originally the lead candidate for that 21 car for next year, and obviously we got Josh Berry behind the wheel. There's rumors of a lot of teams like RFK also looking at him. And we know that apparently Chevy and Hendrick Motorsports really likes Justin Haley. And we know Justin Haley drove for Spire just a couple years ago. What he's done with Rick Ware this year has been phenomenal and incredible. Now, is Spire Motorsports an upgrade from Raceway Racing? I would say yes. They're starting to figure out their footing over at Spire Motorsports right now. The pace and speed is continuing to get a lot better. And I think if you have a dynamic duo of Justin Haley and Ronnie Childs, which Ronnie really likes Justin Haley from what we understand, and we've seen Ronnie make drivers that are decent, make them really good. David Rudiman got multiple wins with Ronnie Childs as the crew chief in 2009 at the Coast 600. Basically, that was a rain-shortened win. And then, of course, also 2010 at Chicagoland. He got Brian Vickers a win in 2013. He almost won races with Scott Riggs in 04, 05, and 06. he's done some great things, and of course had a lot of success with Kevin Harvick for many years. And Josh Berry has shown some very impressive speed throughout this year. I think if you team up Riley Childers with Justin Haley next year, I think these two are going to absolutely set the world on fire. This is a combination I think to be really, really good. So let's say Justin Haley does decide to, in fact, go over there in 2025. What would be my expectations? Well, I think this will be the best 7 cars ever performed. I think they'll be running around top 20 points all year long. And I think that Justin Haley, unlike Corey LaJoie, will do a lot better in that seat next year. I predict around the top 20 in the standings, and I think he'll do a really good job if he goes there for 2025. So what happens to Corey LaJoie then? I think he takes over the 51 car or moves down to the Truck Series. There's been people linking him to the 51 car for Rick Ware, maybe like a trade-off perhaps. I know Bob mentioned that in one of his articles earlier this week. So that could definitely be an option going into next year. But most likely Corey LaJoie won't be in the Cup Series. We could see Ryan Preece also take over the 51. Some mention him as a candidate for the 7 car as well. I think Ryan Preece ends up in Xfinity with the Haas factory team. But that being said about Justin Haley, I think if he's full-time with the Spire group, I think he's going to do a really great job. He's worked with them before. I know they're different than where they were a few years ago, but I really think that Justin Haley is a really great and talented race car driver, and I kind of hope he gets a chance and an opportunity to drive for Spire Motorsports in 2025. So, that is good for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Do you think Justin Haley is going to Spire? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Austin Dillon should receive a penalty for what he did at Richmond? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what your thoughts about Suarez returning to Trackhouse? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If there's any videos or news dropping later today, you'll probably see it. Tomorrow, you're going to see the playoff predictions for the Truck Series for 2024, and you'll see some other videos dropping this week as well. Got a lot of great content dropping that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.